Thank you, Shannon. An incredibly busy week for both parties. Here to discuss is the host of WGN Political Report, Paul Lisnek.
Hi,
Paul,
guys. Hi.
So to kind of use a phrase, where there is smoke, there is fire. This is just not going away when it comes to Joe Biden stepping aside.
It's not going away, but what is changing from day to day is the reports we're getting about Joe Biden and where he stands. You know, if we talked about this last night, I would have said there's a lot of information coming from the White House that says he's really considering making the shift. Today, those reports are shifting. And from talking to some members of Congress, here's the way I'm putting it together, which is he is being sort of guarded by his campaign operatives, being shown certain information which isn't necessarily the reality of what's going on out there, but that's what they're showing him. Nancy Pelosi is getting in as much as she can in the middle of it all. She's not having it, you know, to have him, because at one point I guess the president says, I'll show you numbers where I'm winning, and she went, show me those numbers. So a lot of bitterness. Apparently he's very angry right now at Pelosi, angry at former President Obama. He's kind of going kicking and screaming, but I still think the momentum with 12 more members of Congress and the Senate coming out today, the momentum has to be to push him in that direction. It's a tough decision, but he's got to make it soon.
Well, let's talk about the reality. Can Biden overcome the polls that say right now he can't beat Trump?
I don't think he can. I mean, because there's nothing changing right now. When you know, with Trump experiencing going through the assassination attempt last week, which is a major event, of course, for him, but also for the election. And then we come off the RNC, which will give a temporary bump. But the bottom line is you have to look at the Democrats and go, what is going on here that's going to change any of this? Look, Biden's had COVID for the last several days. He's not bedridden. Why isn't he calling into TV shows? Why isn't he doing more phone interviews and showing that? The question is, can he? Is he not willing to? I don't know. We're not seeing him. So that's one of the concerns. He's got to be out there and change minds. The problem is he's fine when he's at a podium with a prompter, but he's not showing himself as capable when he's just coming off the cuff. It's just not working. The change seems to be inevitable, but we'll see. I know there's a lot of Biden supporters out there who are Democrats, but others are looking and saying he cannot win. By the way, quickly on Vice President Harris,
Sure.
She doesn't poll much better against Trump than he does. But one of the things I think, analyzing this, that would happen is if he bows out, if she becomes the nominee, and I pretty much think she'd have to, then I think you will see Democrats coalesce around her because they'll have the next generation, the youthful person, and they will find their way to her, and her numbers will probably go up.
So, you know, in terms of dotting the I's and crossing the T's and stuff like that, with the convention coming up, how would that actually happen? Would that be bartered on the floor? Or do those electors, if that's the proper term, from those states and primaries, do they pass on their votes to whoever would be?
So they're delegates. And here's the thing. This has to happen before you get to that August 19th convention, because the Democrats are taking a virtual vote. These have to do with some laws in Ohio and reasons this happened we don't need to talk about, but unless you want to talk about it. But the actual vote's going to be like August 6th. So that's when the game's over. But let's assume that Biden takes himself out of it by August 6th. The question is, once again, because of these Ohio rules, that's what required the deadline of early August. Ohio changed its law to say, no, it's not required, but the Democrats aren't buying it. They think Ohio will change it back. So the bottom line is something looks like it has to happen by then. What will happen? One of two things, Patrick. Either President Biden says, I anoint Vice President Harris. I picked her, you know, the first time, and this time she can be president. That's why I picked her. And but it's still up to the delegates. He can't give her his delegates. The delegates become free. Because they are Biden-Harris delegates, one has to assume they say, okay, we're good with that too. They could do anything else. The second thing that could happen, he could say, I'm not supporting anybody, have an open convention, good luck to whoever wins this, then you have a mess, but it will work its way out.
Ooh, okay, you're mentioning the DNC. Let's talk about the RNC. A lot of talk about unity heading into Trump's speech last night. Did he deliver on that promise?
So I think the biggest reason for the unity, the credit has to go to Nikki Haley. She was that block of votes that was missing for him, that sort of 20% anti-Trump vote, and people, they were voting. Listen, even when the primaries were over, they're still voting for her. But at the convention, she basically said, I'm endorsing, not just I'm supporting, I'm endorsing President Trump, and basically telling her delegates to go for him too. That was probably the sweep. With regard to the former president's presentation last night, look, there's mixed bags about it. You can do a fact check on it, and there's over 20 misstatements of fact or untruths, whatever you want to call them, where he said things that just weren't true. He said he was going to change the tone. He was very somber in his tone, but he was still going after Biden and crazy Nancy Pelosi. So the rhetoric was still there. Now, many of us had the script. We knew what he was supposed to say. So where all that stuff happened, where he went off the script, that wasn't in the script. So what happened was he got up there, he had his prompter, and then the prompter would stop as he would shift gears and go after Pelosi and go after, that's Trump being Trump, and there's no way to stop that.
Circle back on Nikki Haley. Was that do you think that was a negotiated endorsement?
No. And I don't know that for sure, but here's my analysis of why I think that's. First of all, she wasn't invited to the convention. So start there. It was only a few days ahead of time that she was invited to the convention, and she wasn't going to speak at the convention until just a couple of days before. So now you could say, well, isn't that the negotiation? I think Nikki Haley has her eyes set on 2028. She knows that if she didn't do what she did, as much as it's hypocritical, and it is, she's toast when it comes to 2028.
I'm going to throw in for my own political good.
Self-preservation, regardless of what Donald Trump may or may not have said.
Let's talk about the J.D. Vance pick for VP. And what does that signal versus someone who may have been a safer choice?
So look, J.D. Vance went to Yale. There's the one side, Yale Law School, big firm lawyer, private investment banker guy, right? I mean, all that good stuff. But then there's the flip side, which he talked about, which is I'm the hillbilly hillbilly LG guy? Let me talk about my mama. So he created himself as this down home, I'm poor, I basically am you, Ohio. I'm you, Pennsylvania. I'm you, all these Rust Belt states that we want to bring into the Republican tent. That's the role I think he's going to serve. He doesn't have the magic of Donald Trump in terms of his presentation. He can tell a story, but I don't know how effective it was, but he'll be used to reach some of those.
He has the commonality, though. Right?
He does. Well, yeah, that's
the whole self.
Exactly, right. And he will carry on the MAGA. He's more MAGA than Trump, so he'll carry on that at least so far. But he'll carry that poster on into the future.
There was more Trump news outside of the RNC this week. His appointed judge, Aileen Cannon in Florida, dismissing his classified documents
And here's
case.
the thing, and when we heard Trump talk about the smart judge and, she did this because I'm innocent, I didn't do anything. Just the bottom line and make it clear. She threw that case out on a technicality. She said, these special prosecutors, she took that little clip from Clarence Thomas up at the Supreme Court, who put it in an opinion in the immunity case. It had no business being in the opinion, nothing to do with anything. But he basically said, Aileen Cannon, here you go. So she threw out the entire case saying this whole special prosecutor thing is unconstitutional. That will get appealed to the 11th Circuit. The risk she takes is the 11th Circuit could now pull her off the case because it's sort of strike number 3 with her. Finally, Hunter Biden's out there saying, please, if we're not going to have special prosecutors, don't come after me too. That may create a different set of opinions than the Supreme Court has to deal with.
More coming up Sunday morning.
Yeah, Sunday morning I'm going to have Mike Quigley on the show. He'll be here live because you just got to do the latest of what is going on. We're going to talk to the new Republican leader in the state of Illinois, Kathleen Salvi. She'll be with us. And then also, so that's Sunday, and more about the convention. But next Friday, where I do the midday news author interviews with you guys, of course, I'll be talking to Mo Rocca, who will be here on Friday, talking about, he's with the CBS Sunday Morning. He's sometimes with Wait, Don't Tell Me. He's got a new book out called Roctogenarians, How All of Us, When We're 80, Can Still Accomplish.
A satirist.
Exactly.
I think you need to do a whole segment on he's more MAGA than Trump.
He is.
So circle back on that.
He wasn't, but
no,
he is.
he
Come
is.
around.
Thank you, Paul Lisnick.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Paul.
Happy weekend.